I'm Kathi Vidal. From shaping AI policy for the Biden administration to working on global innovation policy, I have heard from numerous companies on AI. We know that AI holds the potential to democratize innovation and to solve community and world problems. But we also know we need to mitigate the risks. Today, I am chatting with Bobby Malhotra, a partner at Winston & Strawn in the LA office. Bobby is a key figure at the intersection of AI and the legal practice, particularly in AI governance. His work spans e-discovery, data privacy, and cross-border legal issues, making him a valuable resource for understanding how AI is shaping the legal landscape. Bobby today is going to discuss AI governance frameworks and how companies should think about AI and the key risk mitigation strategies they should incorporate in today's political and regulatory landscape. Welcome, Bobby.
Thank you, Kathi. I'm excited to be here today with you.
So we're sitting here a few months into the new administration. The Biden executive order on AI has been revoked. The Trump administration is seeking comments from industry to form their own AI policy. For those familiar with the initiatives from the prior administration, including the NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology Risk Management Framework, what, if anything, from the Biden administration has survived?
So, Kathi, that's a really great question. Not surprisingly, this administration has taken a deregulatory, business-friendly, AI developer-friendly, hands-off approach. It has, via executive order, rolled back many of the Biden administration's AI regulatory efforts. Biden's executive order, of course, set up broad oversight when it comes to AI development, including creating the AI Safety Institute and tasked NIST with developing guidelines to help companies assess and mitigate risks. Because the NIST framework was spearheaded originally by President Trump, and that precedes the Biden AI executive order, it is likely to remain. However, how much teeth, how much effort, how much resources that it will have will depend on the administration. And of course, we know the new administration's focus on budget cuts and resource cuts, reduction of force, that's been their strategy. So how much teeth NIST will have kind of remains to be seen. I think the future is foggy at best for the amount of funding and resources NIST will actually receive to develop guidelines. And that's important because many companies have already started to index to the NIST AI risk management framework. So without that framework and continued development, that will potentially leave a gap when it comes to AI governance, compliance, and development of guidelines, even in the private sector.
So with Trump basically eviscerating the entire executive order, there was a lot that was just left on the cutting room floor. Do you have any thoughts on what may survive at the end of the day once the Trump administration sets their own policy and what's really gone for good?
Yeah, I think the elephant in the room, I think, relates to a portion of Biden's executive order which required private companies to report their AI training methods and security testing and vulnerabilities, so public disclosure of that information. Pre-election, of course, the Trump administration argued that such reporting requirements would stifle innovation, they were too transparent, and it could expose potential trade secrets for those AI companies. I don't see any such reporting or transparency requirements in what the Trump administration will ultimately decide to do. So I do think that is a key component of the Biden's executive order that is not going to remain, as part of President Trump's vision and the administration's new approach to AI.
Interesting. So is there anything else you think we should expect from this administration?
So I think we're going to enter a period now of voluntary industry self-governance rather than prescriptive mandates at the federal level, a deregulation environment which will lead to increase capital and spur investment. Of course, we already heard about Stargate a couple months ago, which was a partnership amongst Silicon Valley stalwarts or giants to fund $500 billion in AI infrastructure. Recently, Apple made a big announcement of $500 billion that it's investing to expand and build servers and really focus on infrastructure. I believe we're going to continue to see that type of a focus on the private sector in infrastructure and in technology. What I do see the Trump administration focused on when it does come to AI oversight is in the previous administration, as well as in the upcoming administration, their focus on national security and defense and cybersecurity issues. They've already made that a point that that is going to take high priority. So I think that is a focus that we will continue to monitor.
Well, and that's all well and good, but as we know in the privacy space where the government doesn't step in, the federal government, states often pick up the slack. And so we've certainly seen a lot of movement by a number of states. What are your thoughts on regulatory measures at the state level, and where is that headed?
Yeah, that's such a good point. And an environment where deregulation or self-regulation becomes the norm, it will lead to more state-specific laws. States will step in to fill the gap. That's going to require is companies to navigate this web of state-specific laws and international laws, which will be cumbersome, potentially create risks and additional burdens. So I think you hit the nail right on the head, Kathy, when you said, much like the data privacy landscape post-GDPR in 2018, when we didn't have federal regulation, you saw states like California jump in and enact comprehensive privacy legislation. And that created a snowball effect of additional states coming out with their privacy legislation. So I think things are kind of in that parallel track here, and to some extent even more advanced that as we are with AI, because on the AI side, we're already seeing states like California, Colorado, New York, Texas, Virginia with either proposed legislation or legislation that's already been enacted in AI in different sectors related to AI. State lawmakers in 2025 have introduced a diverse array of AI bills. I think it's in the hundreds in 2025 already. And California, which is on the cutting edge when it comes to regulation, introduced Senate Bill 468, which mandates that high-risk deployers of AI establish comprehensive security infrastructure guidelines. So I think it is going to be a challenging environment for the short term, at least, without a lack of federal regulation and the federal administration stepping in.
Well, ironically, we're coming to you from California here in our LA office. So with all of these regulations throughout all of these states, how can GCs prepare themselves?
So a couple of different points there. I think one, there's no substitute for digging in, rolling up your sleeves, and understanding how AI is being used within your organization, mapping out the areas in which it's being deployed. What are those use cases? Identify the specific use cases. And then from there, once you understand how and why AI is being deployed, you can potentially conduct, where needed, AI risk assessments. And from there, you can understand and potentially restrict or outlaw high-risk use cases, such as use case in the employment sector, for example. And a couple of other points there, company-wide to train models with lawful, reliable data. These AI models are very data-hungry. The more data, the better. But a key principle is you need valid data, you need lawful data, and that's lawful from all aspects, AI regulatory aspects, data privacy aspects, and potential industry-specific regulations that you may be in, for example, if you're in the industry, insurance industry. And then, a mantra that we always said in the data privacy world, limit the ingestion of sensitive, private PII data into any AI models. That is a key that I think companies can do to start preparing for this tsunami, this wave of AI regulation.
Well, and Bobby, I did promise we would talk about AI governance, so let's turn to that. Is what you just described a best practice when it comes to AI governance? And do you have other thoughts on the best practices you've seen your clients implement when it comes to AI governance?
So I think in terms of best practices, the first thing that you want to do is think about what your AI governance team is going to look like, right? And in my experience, the best performers on the AI governance end usually recruit a multidisciplinary team. This is a team from the data privacy side, IP folks with experience in IP issues, compliance folks, information governance folks who understand where the data is. And it's all about building a team of multidisciplinary folks because AI touches on so many specific industries. It's not one person or it's not a plug and play approach. A lot of times there's this juxtaposition in the industry where people think that data privacy equals AI. Data privacy is a consent-based approach. Very, very different than AI, which is a risk-based approach. So the two, although there's overlap, are fundamentally different. And I think I can't stress enough on how important it is on establishing the right team when it comes to AI governance.
So that's interesting, Bobby, because the approach that you're suggesting for clients is very much the approach Winston has taken internally, where we've drawn from our different practice groups to put together our AI committee.
That's exactly right. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's the same mantra, same practice that corporations should also think about when they think about who is going to be part of their AI governance team.
Great. Sometimes clients get it right. Sometimes we help them when they've gotten it wrong. Any interesting stories you can share with us?
I mean, in terms of getting it wrong, I think it's a bit premature, right? The EU AI Act, the initial provisions have just come into effect this year or are coming into effect in later parts of the year. California enacted 18 pieces of law on one specific day last fall, which are coming into effect. I think it's a little bit early to point to situations where private sector companies have gotten into trouble or run afoul of the AI-specific laws. But I think you can look to examples of other situations where companies have gotten in trouble. For example, a couple of years ago, there was a situation where the CFPB fined a company millions of dollars in connection with faulty algorithms that they were developing or that they introduced to the market that harmed consumers, that basically caused overdraft of penalties for the consumers, right? That is a typical example of AI governance and understanding from a transparency standpoint what your algorithms are doing. So that's a misstep right there. I think we can also look at examples on the data privacy end now that GDPR has been around for 7 years, right? There's been instances where companies have been fined hundreds of millions of dollars for data privacy issues related to, for example, ad targeting in the privacy space. So I think that there are examples out there, and AI is going to be very similar for companies that run afoul of those laws.
Well, and Bobby, we started talking about what the federal government is doing, and then we moved on to states, and you just introduced the EU AI Act. How should general counsel and other counsel be thinking about complying with both all of the states' regulations, potential federal regulations in the U.S., as well as the EU AI Act?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. That's the $64,000 question that a lot of companies and GCs have. I mean, obviously, dealing with a complex web of laws is quite challenging at the state level. And it's even more challenging for multinational companies now who have to contend with the EU AI Act and evolving legislation from other parts of China and beyond. I would say that, kind of think through what your governance approach is going to be. Is it a global approach where you index to the highest applicable, most stringent standards, such as the EU AI Act, across your entire organization? So you have one unified approach, which could obviously be overly restrictive in less lenient jurisdictions, I should say. Is it to develop a purely localized approach, right, where you're carving out jurisdiction by jurisdiction depending on where you're operating? Challenging to implement and manage, and it could introduce issues related to resources and costs because essentially you have a compliance program for each individual jurisdiction. Is it a hybrid approach where you're combining both the elements of a global and regional, and you're adopting global overarching standards, such as the monitoring requirements from the EU AI Act, and then you're making jurisdiction-specific carve-outs where necessary, for example, to comply with certain California laws that just got enacted? Unfortunately, it's the classic lawyer answer of it depends. It really does depend. There's no right or wrong answer. It depends on your industry. It depends on your resources internally to handle compliance programs. It depends on which specific jurisdictions you're operating in as a business. And of course, the big factor that a lot of people don't think about, it depends on your company culture.
Let's talk about legal data intelligence model. What is that and how does that relate to AI governance?
So the legal data intelligence framework or model is something I hold near and dear to my heart, Kathy. It is something that I helped found. And basically, it is a toolkit of checklists, white papers, documentation for legal professionals to handle legal data challenges across a plethora of industries, from data privacy to compliance to e-discovery to AI. And it's an initiative, that where we are going to be focused on developing these toolkits. And one particular use case that we are very focused on right now is the AI governance use case, where we're going to be developing a series of checklists, questionnaires, white papers around how to conduct AI data inventorying and risk assessments, with the goal of providing AI practitioners and companies a starting point, a framework, if you will, to work with, so you don't have to start with a blank sheet of paper. So it's all about legal data professionals solving data challenges across various industries, and we are very much focused on AI governance in terms of developing a toolkit there.
Is that going to cover other countries as well, or is it focused mostly on the U.S.?
It's going to be multinational. Initially, we're going to be covering the EU AI Act, so we're going to be covering Europe. We're going to be covering various state-specific laws, and from there it will expand. So it will be international in scope, but we're taking baby steps.
What other areas of the world should GCs be paying attention to other than Europe and the U.S.?
I think they should be paying attention to Asia. There's been proposed legislation or enacted legislation in China, in India, and of course those are the two most populous countries in the world. So you should really focus on Asia as well in terms of what approach they're going to take. And it really depends on the country. Singapore, for example, will take one approach. China's taking a different approach. So it's a varied approach. It just adds to the complex web of problems and issues that GCs and compliance professionals and AI governance professionals have to deal with.
Well, and if I weren't working with you so closely on these initiatives, I would find this quite daunting. You mentioned the legal data intelligence model and told us a bit about that. Is that a resource that you created at Winston?
No, that's actually an industry standard framework. So 18 founders got together from various organizations, law firms, corporations, the vendor side, the government side, to come up with this initiative, this model, this framework. Highly recommend checking it out at ldi.org, legal data, or just Google legal data intelligence, and you'll be directed to the website.
Can you tell us what other resources people should turn to?
In my back pocket, I'm looking at the IAPP website on AI information governance and AI governance in general on probably a daily basis. The Sedona principles have some excellent material, the Sedona conference. And I would say the Brennan Center of Justice legislation has a great tracker that tracks the various pieces of legislation out there. So those are the kind of the four key pieces that I look for, Kathy, and on a daily basis.
So we're here with Bobby Malhotra talking about AI governance. Thank you so much for your time today, and check out those resources.
Thank you, Kathy. This was great.